On this week's GCN Racing News Show, with rumours suggesting that Jumbo-Visma and Soudal Quick-Step could be merging, I'll be looking at what it means for the teams, the riders, the staff and pro cycling as a whole. TLDR, it's not good. I'll also look back at all the racing from last week, including the European Championships, the Tours of Luxembourg and Langkawi, and the latest rounds of the USCX from Rochester, in which a bright young talent is continuing to emerge. This week in the world of racing, we learned that the roads of Luxembourg are fast. Very fast. This is Mark Hirschi and Dylan Toon descending wet roads at 100 km/h on stage 3.
Don't take your hands off the bars. Not at 100 km/h, please.
We also learnt that one rider was flying higher than all others at the European Championships in Drenthe yesterday. Well, it looks better fun than actually racing a bike, doesn't it? I think we should get Hank on one of those as soon as possible. And finally, we learned that Jumbo-Visma and Soudal Quick-Step may have been working on a merger since July, a merger that could be on the cards for 2024. This is from a story that was published on the Dutch cycling website Wielerfiets and written by very well-respected cycling journalist Raymond Kerkhoffs, a man who has his finger on the pulse of all things pro cycling, but particularly in Dutch and Belgian cycling. You can read the story on that website, or if you don't speak Dutch, Dan Benson has published a couple of stories on our own website, globalcyclingnetwork.com, in which he's got a reaction from a rider and a staff member of Jumbo-Visma. We'll put a link to those stories in the description just down below. Now, before I get into the nitty-gritty of this, I should point out the very obvious. This has not been confirmed by either party, so it could just be wild speculation, or it might be that a discussion was had between the two teams, but that nothing will come of it. We'll have to wait and see how this unfolds over the coming days and weeks. Whatever the end result, though, it's hard right now not to speculate about what a merger between two of pro cycling's most successful and long-running teams would mean for them and mean for the sport. Let's start with the complications, though. Both of the men's teams currently have almost 30 riders under contract in 2024, and with the UCI rules stating that World Tour teams can have no more than 30 riders, that would be a lot of riders looking for a new team. However, in order for this to be approved by the UCI, the riders that are under contract next year would need to be found a new team and be paid what they are owed under their current contract. So other teams that do have space could find that they can effectively add to their roster free of charge next year, with the rider's salary still paid by somebody else. With the staff, though, as far as I know, there wouldn't be those sorts of provisions, and so if a merger does take place, a lot of people will be without a job, even if that doesn't include the riders. With the women's teams, there are 32 riders contracted between Jumbo-Visma and AG Insurance Soudal Quick-Step this year, and it's very unclear as to how a potential merger would affect them or whether they would remain as two separate entities. Which riders would go and which would stay, though, on the men's team if there were a merger? Well, that is an even bigger question. I mean, there's been lots of rumours over recent months and years about Remco Evenepoel wanting to jump ship to a team that can better support his ambitions of winning Grand Tours, and in many respects, a merger with Jumbo-Visma would give him that support both on and off the bike. But is he going to want to share leadership with Jonas, Vingegaard and Primož Roglic? Probably not, and neither will they. There's been lots of talk as well about a potential move for Roglic. He wants to win the Tour de France, so does Vingegaard, so does Evenepoel. That does not appear to be a marriage made in heaven. Not for them, and actually not for us as fans of the sport either. We want to see the best riders in the world racing against each other, not on the same team with different race programs or trying to appease the ambitions of multiple big stars at the biggest races. Now, to an extent, Jumbo-Visma have already had to do that this year, very successfully to be fair, but continuing to please their biggest champions was already going to get increasingly difficult without adding more to the mix. Of course, mergers amongst top-tier teams is nothing new. It's happened many times, in the recent past in fact. Velo Test Team and Garmin, Leopard Trek and Radio Shack, Garmin Sharp and Cannondale, BMC and CCC, to name just a few. Jayco Alula and Live Racing are merging next year as well, so it's not unprecedented, but I don't remember a bigger merger than the one that appears to be on the cards here, i.e. in terms of the sheer quality of riders on both rosters. But the worst thing about all of this, if it's true, is that it would mean that Jumbo-Visma, the most successful team in the sport for the last 2 years, was unable to find a new title sponsor to replace Jumbo, who will end their financial commitment to the team at the end of next year. Beyond anything else, what that says about the sport is that it's not seen by large companies as being worth the financial commitment and outlay, not even for the best team in the world. And that's a bit depressing, if I'm being honest, and doesn't bode well for any other team should they find themselves in the same situation in the near future. So I, for one, hope that this is just a rumour, that it isn't actually happening. The only way this could be a good thing for the sport would be if both teams were on the verge of folding and that this was the only choice to survive. That's my take on the whole situation, but I'd love to get your thoughts at home. You can let me know in the comment section down below, or you can get involved in the comment section under the articles that you can find over on globalcyclingnetwork.com. Right, shall we get on to some actual racing? Yes, I think that would be a good idea. I'm going to start with the Men's European Championships, which was so good in the finale, I think it's worth replaying the final minute of action for you right now.
They round it here and still the drive goes on. Clock's been stripped out. It's going to be on the final climb. This could be super dramatic for the European Champions jersey and title. That's the chasing group, don't forget. And here he is. Oh my goodness, it's going to be so tight. Laporte's going to just turn into this final climb. Is he going to get caught at the very last? What an amazing finish to this amazing day. Christophe Laporte drives into the final climb and now it's time to go. It's a big pickup moment and it's Wout van Aert that picks up. He just by his teammate right now and just trying to get onto him is Olaf Koy, who's in the frame here. Laporte is just going to hit the 50-metre mark. There's the 150. Here comes Wout van Aert. Koy's still very much in the frame as well. Wout van Aert's going to come up and over the top of the forlorn Laporte, I believe. Laporte kicks again. Is he going to hold on? He's got the line through the corner. He's going to make it. What a finish! What a finish that was! Christophe Laporte wins it by no more than a bike length.
What was most amazing to me about the end of that race was that Laporte had anything left to accelerate once he was caught by the other three. That was his 31st career win, but his first at a major championship. France, Belgium and the Netherlands filled the podium spots, but guess what? They all ride for the same trade team, Jumbo-Visma, that's right. In the women's, it was always going to be hard to beat the Dutch, especially on home soil. Misha Bredevold went on the attack with 10 k's to go, and both Wiebes and Vollering were marking behind, making it very difficult for anybody to chase. What did seem a bit bizarre, though, was when Vollering went to the front on the final climb to the finish, with Wiebes and Kopecky on her wheel. In the end, they didn't catch Bredevold, and Wiebes beat Kopecky in the sprint, but for a while, it looked like the Dutch were going from a guaranteed win to something that was a bit less certain. All's well that ends well, though, as they say. In the time trials, Marlon Ruser and Josh Tarling took dominant wins for Switzerland and Great Britain respectively. Tarling's win was particularly impressive given that he's still a teenager and in his first year out of the junior category. The men's race also made the headlines due to a crash for Stefan Kung of Switzerland. He crossed the line with a smashed helmet and blood all over his face, leaving everybody questioning why he was allowed to continue after his crash. He's since undergone surgery and there's an internal investigation going on in the Swiss Cycling Federation. At the Tour of Luxembourg, the opening two stages were taken by Corbin Strong and Jenthe Beermans, but the GC started to take more shape on stage 3. There, Ben Healy went on a trademark long-range attack, going with 33 k's to go, catching and dropping the last remaining breakaway rider, and ended up winning the stage by 15 seconds. However, it didn't go the way he wanted the following day in the individual time trial. He conceded enough time there to drop to third place on GC, behind Mark Hirschi and Brandon McNulty, both of UAE Team Emirates, and that was the order of the final GC as well. That individual time trial marked the first win in that discipline for Victor Campenaerts since 2019, and I think we all loved seeing that, whilst the fifth and final stage was won by Tobias Johannesson of Uno X. On to the racing then that we've got coming up on GCN Plus this week, and the Italian one-day races are looming. On Thursday it's the Coppa Agostoni, and then on Saturday the Giro dell'Emilia, and it has quite the start list. Pogačar, Roglic, Adam and Simon Yates, Ciccone, Hindley, Sivakov, Woods, Vlasov and a defending champion Enric Mas amongst others, and more might be confirmed before the start on Saturday. Both those races are available to watch worldwide without any restrictions. The Tour de Langkawi continues through to Saturday, with the climb to Genting Highlands set to shape the general classification on Wednesday's stage. But that's not the only stage race this week, because we also have the Crow race. That's also got a decent field with Matej Mohoric, he'll be wearing number 1. Sheffield, Tarling, Howson, Simmons and Hayter are also there, whilst Christophe Dainese, Milan and Viviani are amongst the sprinters on the provisional start list. There are a couple of territory restrictions on the Crow race though, so please check if that's available where you are. Beyond that, we also have the Circuit Franco-Belge on Thursday, where Arnaud Delis will start as the big favourite, and then the Femmen Ardèche Classic and Tour de Vendée both taking place on Sunday. Outside of road racing, the USCX continues this weekend with rounds 5 and 6 in Charm City, Baltimore, and the UCI World Mountain Bike Series also heads to the USA with the penultimate rounds of the cross-country, downhill and short track series taking place in Snowshoe. Again, all of those races are available for all GCN Plus subscribers to watch, as is the Super League Triathlon from Malibu on Saturday. Meanwhile, our documentary this week is all about cycling photography. Juan Antonio Flecha teamed up with the renowned professional cycling photographer Camille McMillan to try and get some tips. They ride to Spain's remote Picos de Europa to capture its beautiful vistas, wildlife, glacial valleys and peaceful cow meadows. Along the way, they enlist 3-time world champion and local lad Oscar Freire to pose for them. Can Juan Antonio learn what it takes to capture the perfect cycling photo? Well, you'll find out if you watch the film, but in the meantime, here's a sneak peek, a snapshot, if you will.
The Picos de Europa, nestled in the Cantabrian Mountains in northern Spain. I'm Juan Antonio Flecha, and I race through this incredible landscape in many editions of the Vuelta. Now, 10 years after retiring, I still enjoy riding here, but these days I take things much more slowly. I'm surrounded by nature, all these horses, so many of them, look at them. And I've taken up a new hobby. I've invited cycling photographer Camille McMillan to ride through the Picos to learn how to take the perfect shot. What on earth is he riding? He's created some of the most compelling and memorable photos in the sport. Here's a masterpiece.
Oh.
I mean, so many great photos.
And there's so many different narratives going on.
A lot.
I think it's the layers of storytelling. It's not just a shadow of a bike. There's a story going on there.
That film will be available for all GCN Plus subscribers to watch from tomorrow. Moving on to more racing. At the Tour de Langkawi, Arvid de Klein and Gleb Syriza were the winners of the opening 2 stages, both in bunch sprints. But having watched stage 3 this morning, I can tell you there is a new flying mullet in town. Move over Shane Archibald, welcome George Jackson. With both Syriza and de Klein dropped from the main peloton on stage 3, Jackson took full advantage, and with that, his 4th win of the season so far for Bolton Equity's Black Spoke. And finally in road racing, Jasper Philipsen was back to his winning ways at Paris-Chauny yesterday. His 3rd straight win in one-day races and the 14th of his season so far. That makes him the most successful male sprinter of 2023 by some margin. Only Pogačar and Vingegaard have more wins this year. On to Cyclo-cross now, and rounds 3 and 4 of the USCX in Rochester, New York. Magali Richette was back to her winning ways and came out of the weekend with a 100% record in the series. On Saturday, she finished close to a minute clear of Caroline Manny, who had been her closest challenger last weekend. On Sunday, though, in what was a 1-2-3 for Canadians, she was pushed a bit closer. And the woman who pushed her so close was 18-year-old Isabella Holmgren. She was born in 2005. How old does that make you feel? Very, is my answer. She didn't compete in rounds 1 and 2, but that 2nd place yesterday came off the back of a 4th place the day before. Now, many of you will remember her from the World Championships in Ogareda at the start of this year. There, she took the gold medal in the junior women's race in front of her twin sister, Ava. So Isabella is no stranger to major success in the junior category, and judging by this weekend, it won't be long until she's enjoying big wins in the senior category either. To be fair to Richette, though, she did suffer a number of mishaps in yesterday's race, otherwise her margin of victory would have been more what we were used to. In the men's races, it felt like we could all rest more comfortably again, didn't it? That was because Vincent Bastans turned up and won both races. Last week he was a little bit off the pace, apparently due to a heavy crash he'd had in the lead up to them. But he was back to his winning ways this weekend despite continued pain in his hip. On Saturday he finished just clear of Andrew Strohmeyer, whilst on Sunday it was his compatriot Anton Ferdinand who pushed him closest. On to some transfer news now, in what has been a slightly quieter week on that front. Gorka Izagirre will leave Movistar at the end of the season and join his brother Jon at Team Cofidis. Meanwhile, EF Education Easy Post have snapped up Lucas Naruka. The 19-year-old has been picking up some impressive results this year with Trinity Racing, clearly enough to impress the World Tour teams. And finally, Nicolo Bonifacio will leave Intermarché Circus Wanty at the end of this year and move on to Team Corotec Sella Italia. And that brings this week's Racing News Show to a close. Have a great week, everyone, and I'll see you this time next week.